The Sports Buffet brings out another old segment from Talking High School Sports. It's Where Are They Now? And it's Mark Hanks, former head boys basketball coach at Liberty High School in Bedford, now head coach at Pulaski County. He's also had a stint as an assistant at VMI. In this episode of the Sports Buffet, you're going to hear from Dennis Carter, Scott Abell, Mike Cartolaro, Mark Hanks, and much, much more. One of the classier guys around, especially in high school basketball, but just a classy person in life. It's Mark Hanks right here on the Sports Buffet. I asked one of the foremost authorities on high school sports in the area, ABC 13's Dennis Carter, for his comments on Mark Hanks, and here's how he remembered the former Liberty head coach and one-time VMI assistant.
Mark Hanks, boy, what a high school basketball coach. Was able to take the Liberty Minutemen to a couple of state championships, and just a coach that really commanded your attention. I can remember when Mark Hanks spoke, players listened. If they didn't listen, they were probably looking for a team to play on, because, you know, when Coach Hanks spoke, he got your attention, and it was either his way or the highway. He had a great way of getting the players to rally around him, play good defensive basketball. You know, defense wins, as coaches will tell you, and Mark Hanks definitely stressed the defense. He liked running sometimes an up-tempo style of basketball with a lot of pressure on the basketball, able to create those turnovers and get your team going the other way and for some easy baskets. I remember after Liberty High School, Mark was an assistant at VMI for a few years, where he worked with the Keydets program there, and of course then went on to Pulaski County and is having a good career there as a high school basketball coach. But just a guy who loved the game of basketball. You know, when you saw him, that's all he wanted to talk about was basketball, and just great with the kids, and I think the kids respected him as a basketball coach.
One of Mark Hanks' college suite mates was Altavista head coach Mike Cartolaro. I asked the head coach of the Colonels, talk about Mark Hanks. How much does he hate to lose?
You know, we're alike. He takes a loss a lot harder than getting a win. You know, it's you talk about a guy who loves to win. Give me a guy that hates to lose, and I think that's his approach. He's like me. He can't stand to lose. You know, if he gets a win, that's good, and he's happy about it. And get on with business. But a loss is just so much tougher to deal with.
Obviously, when you meet one of your best friends for the first time, it's a memory that's etched into your head. One of my best friends, I met it in 9th grade PE class, my first ever class in high school. When Mike Cartolaro transferred from Roanoke College to Emory and Henry, what a moment. Mark Hanks recounts the beginning of a lifelong friendship.
We just got, very first time I met him, I was a freshman at Emory and Henry, and we just had gotten back from break, as I recall. He had started, we were on tri-semesters, and he had started school, or he'd been at school at Roanoke, and he was going to transfer, but he didn't come till like the second trimester. But I remember I don't know, we hit it off pretty fast, because he was a sports nut like myself. You know, he liked the Phillies and the Sixers and the Eagles. I didn't care for any of it. So I guess we've been competitive in that respect for a while, but then we ended up, both obviously had a love for basketball, and then we ended up pledging the same fraternity and being suite mates the last couple of years there, so we've been close for a long time.
People rightfully gush over what a great coach Mark Hanks is. Just look at the record books, and it says it, 2 state titles from Liberty High School. And he taught a football coach at Liberty High School a thing or two as well. A young Scott Abell just getting into the business of head coaching. Scott Abell recounts a story about Mark Hanks as well.
Well, if you ever watch his kids play basketball, what a physical style basketball they play. You know, and I remember having to fuss at our kids early on in my first couple of years there about, you know, that if you're that physical on the basketball court, I just don't understand why you won't be physical out here. I used to fuss at them. And that's one of the biggest things. And it's just he demanded it of them. And it's just something I had to learn as a young coach. And what a joy it was to watch him coach and watch him work. It really really was. I just learned so much by watching him. And I was a clock operator at the time for the basketball games, and I did that so I could be around the athletes more and just get in touch with the community. And I just, as I watched them run up and down the court and play a physical style defense where they were, just in people's faces nonstop, I just thought, this is what our football team needs to look like. And, so we did try to, as much as we could, model our intensity and our enthusiasm after that.
Stewart Grant has seen many coaches come and go at Liberty High School, from his days as a student to an assistant coach, now to athletic director. He talks about Mark Hanks, the person.
As intense as he was as a coach, he was just as laid back as a person off the court. A very caring man towards his family, and at the time his two young boys. But he was very competitive playing golf, and he is a very good golfer, and very knowledgeable in all areas of sport. I remember a lot of us sitting around and talking and asking each other trivia questions, and Mark either asked the questions that nobody knew the answer to, or he answered the questions that no one else knew the answer to.
You can look at the list of competitors that played for Mark Hanks at Liberty, and it's a who's who of local high school basketball. I asked Mark Hanks, what are your thoughts on Peanut Arrington and Robert Carson, two people whose jersey is hanging in the rafters in the gymnasium in Bedford?
Oh, both special kids. I started going and watching them play. I'd heard about them, and I started to go watch them play, I guess, when they were 4th or 5th graders. And that was a tough time for me because I was just getting started there at Liberty, and the program certainly wasn't, I felt like we'd got it going on the right track, but those guys kept me a light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing. And so whenever I'd get blue, I'd go watch them play rec league, but I watched them grow up, and they're two fine young men.
Some casual fans can mention the names Robert Carson and Peanut Arrington. It might take a more hardcore fan to mention Greg Reynolds and J.J. Coles, but they did a lot for the Liberty program as well. Mark Hanks recalls.
Two of the most competitive kids. I think they were more competitive more so than Robert and Peanut. They didn't play the amount of AAU basketball. Matter of fact, I'm not sure either one of them played AAU basketball. But they're just so competitive in anything they did. I know when they played football in the fall, they're playing for Mike. They would probably go play ball at the Y maybe a couple of times a week or whatever. And I knew they did. I didn't say one thing or another, but then on the weekends they'd go shoot or whatever. And Mike never said anything because he knew when those Friday night lights came on, they were for real and they would compete for him. They were just a joy to coach.
Mike Cartolaro recalls an on-court story from the days with Mark Hanks at Emory and Henry.
When we were playing Washington and Lee, they had a really good team. And that particular night at Emory, we upset them there, and we both had a good night. Nothing special story-wise, other than I can remember us, really being happy that we had upset a quality team. And Emory was in the rebuilding stages when we were there, and Bob Johnson, who's been there now 27, 28 years, that's when Coach first got there. So, we were the guys that, were the building block for what he's done over the years. But at the time, it wasn't an easy situation. But that particular night was a great night.
Some of the best storytellers tell long stories, but if they're long stories, they're normally good stories. I asked Mark Hanks for 2 game stories. One, Pulaski County and Heritage met a few years back at Nelson County, the regional semifinal games. They got split. Salem and Gretna were playing at Amherst, while up on 29 North, Nelson County was playing host to Heritage and Pulaski. Mark Hanks recalls the game.
I saw where Coach Stevens said in the paper it was obviously one of the best games he's ever coached in when we played him in Heritage, the double overtime game. And it was just a battle of wills, and we kind of had our way. The first half with them, I thought, able to keep the ball out on the perimeter and turn them over and stuff like that and use our quickness. And then, the problem was we were using fouls in the process, and then they got the game more of a, even though it wasn't a very high scoring game at halftime, we should have had, I want to say we were up like 27-14. We had some opportunities to be up a lot more. We missed some foul shots and whatever, and then that was tough on us, and how close, because we had 3 great games with Salem that year, and certainly they had a good regional final with Salem, and then played against Greenport. You know, we felt like we could have been in those slots. Just was easy. We had a nice club. Turned on the TV the other night in the MAC championship, and one of my players, Ernie Hodge, was playing for Ohio, and last year in the MAC championship, Akron was playing, and my point guard that night, Brandon Anderson, starts at Akron at defensive back. So, you know, I know Heritage was stocked with some good players, but we certainly had our share of athletes too that night. And that was the first year they built that place, and what a nice gym, you know, and a deserving, you know, they waited a long time and everything there at Nelson to have that and everything. I coached in that other gym numerous times for sure. I guess when I first started coaching, before they had done anything, I don't know if you were in Nelson's older gym, they had kind of a crow's nest, kind of tap on it up there when you wanted to go in the game. My first year there, Nelson sat in the end zone, and you just kind of sat where you could. But anyway, Mike had said, have you seen anything, seen Nelson County gym? He said, it's beautiful. He said, but let me tell you something. He said, if you get there early, he said, make sure you walk your kids over to that far side. He said, because he said there's a big depth perception problem over there because the bleachers are so far removed from the sidelines over there. You know, and I couldn't understand what he was talking about. And he said, it's not a real dark line, a real thick line. And I think since they've actually darkened or thickened the line up through there or whatever. But sure enough, in the, I want to say it was the first overtime, game was tied with about 3 or 4 seconds left, and we ran a play where we're going to flare our guy over to the other side of the floor, where we had a one-on-one matchup, and one of our guards, Brandon, was having a good night that night. Poindexter had a really good night that night, and we flared Corey over, and he was wide open, and my guy throwing the ball in, you know, threw it all the way out, you know, over to almost to the cheerleaders. Well, normally almost to the cheerleaders would be all right, but this time normally to the cheerleaders 10 feet out of bounds. So, you know, it cost us, sure enough, over on that side, and we dribbled out of bounds once or twice. But Heritage hadn't been on that floor either, you know, so it wasn't like they had buku experience over there. I mean, I can't remember if they played Nelson that year or not. I don't think they had.
Because the tournament was originally, wasn't it supposed to be at Appomattox, the whole thing?
Yeah, and then I think they realized after they had the tournament that they couldn't house, you know, as many people, you know. I guess us and Salem probably played in front of, we play our tournament in the Salem Civic Center, and when we played Salem in our district tournament, we probably had, on the low end, you know, 3,500 watching. So, I mean, you know, Appomattox floor, you know, best I remember, is not any bigger, or not as big as old Liberty High School gym, and you know, to play a doubleheader there. And so all of a sudden we got a thing, so they were going to split the doubleheader, and then the championship was going to be at Appomattox.
Because I remember the Salem-Gretna game was actually at Appomattox, and I think they had to, I mean, rarely would you use the word sell out an Appomattox High School in the same breath, but I think they had to turn people away.
Well, I'm sure they did. Yeah,
because Salem had such a big following.
Yeah. And, you know, they had a big following, you know, and our guys didn't know where Nelson County was. Nelson County was, you know, more than big enough for our game. They probably could have played the doubleheader at Nelson. It just seemed like a strange thing to go, you know, 45 minutes past Heritage at least to play a game, you know, against them. And then we had packed for the night, because if we won, us and Salem couldn't agree on, you know, the regional rule is if two teams from another district are playing in a regional championship game, they don't have to travel. You know, say like if Heritage were going to play Gretna back at that time, they could play it in Lynchburg if they, you know, agreed on a site. They didn't have to come all the way to the Civic Center to play that game. So we couldn't, we're such rivals with Salem, you know, we figured we can play at Raft University or Tech or Christiansburg or Blacksburg or Raft University. You know, they wouldn't agree to any of those. they said that we could play the same with Civic Center, which I don't know if you know the whole scoop there, but they play a Christmas tournament there where they play 3 games, and then obviously the district tournament. They don't allow anybody in there for shoot-around the district tournament. Well, us and Christiansburg and Blacksburg don't play in there during the year, and all 3 of those teams that are in our district play the tournament there, and sometimes more games than that. So anyway, we couldn't agree. So we were going to have to go all the way to Appomattox to play it. So we had packed I told the guys, I said, I'm not giving into this. And then on the way down there that day, we already got on the bus. We kind of went the long way. We went into Lexington and had a pregame deal in Lexington and went over to Mountain and Nelson. But on the way down there, our athletic director called me and said, we finally came to an agreement. Would you agree to play at Franklin County High School? They agreed to play us there. So I said, that's fine. Save an hour anyway, or at least the fans know where it is.
I remember it like it was yesterday. Kyle Haney and I were at William Campbell. I believe it was the Region B girls semifinals. Altavista played Amelia, and Chatham also had a game. But there was an upset brewing in Pulaski. Pulaski County Cougars, a highly touted team, state ambitions, played the Gretna Hawks. No one gave Gretna a chance. Vic Hall, Horace Hubbard were there. But still, no one gave Gretna a chance. Mark Hanks recalls the painful night.
2 years ago, we had a team where we felt was worthy of maybe, our battle cry. We lost some really good players off that team to get there, but we knew we could compete with them. And that next year, we really had a nice year, and I think we got up to as high as maybe second or third in the state that year. The only loss we had was at Franklin County with Witcher and those guys, and we were able to beat them at our place at home. So we were 23-1, and I'd seen Gretna live. Came down there, and I was duly impressed with their athleticism, but at the same time, I just didn't feel like, on a bigger floor, which our high school floor is a normal size floor. It's 94 feet, not the shorter courts like a lot of high schools have. And on our big floor and in front of our crowd and all that kind of stuff, I was impressed with Vic Hall, no question, and Hubbard and those guys. And sure enough, we got up 15-8 on them. It was packed. Matter of fact, they held the game up for about 20 minutes so everybody could get in the gym, the line, but they hadn't opened up enough doors. And anyway, we were up 15-7, I believe it was. And we had the officiating crew we had was notorious for not blowing a whistle, which has always been great with me. I love a rough game, and I kind of always coach from the standpoint of if for every 1 or 2 fouls a referee calls, he's going to let 2 or 3 go. So you just foul till they get tired of calling them, kind of thing. But we didn't get any dead balls, and I had my 3 all-district players had already subbed in and out, and I'll be honest with you, I'd already looked at we'd already talked to the coaches. We knew the next night we were going to have to play at the Civic Center against Fleming. It was a very good team. I said we need to play ahead here, think ahead a little bit, for tomorrow night, because obviously we're a pressing team. I said we need to rest some legs, which we normally do anyway. But by the end of the first quarter, there was no more whistles. That was 3.5 minutes. I looked at my 3 leading scorers are at the scores table. There was not another whistle, and the game was tied at the end of the first quarter. In retrospect, you could say, well, you should have called a timeout and got those guys back in there. But we were used to playing without them in the game. It was just them being out that long, and we just totally lost all. We never got the momentum back like we had it early because we had them a little rattled and everything. And they settled back into a zone, and I had a great shooting team. It's probably the better shooting team I ever had at Liberty. Actually had one kid that shot 51% from three-point range. I'm sure he was a leading three-point shooter in times land. It wasn't like he just shot a couple either. Tremendous shooter, and they had 2 other. We could just, and Gretna went zone, and I think we were like 10 for 45 from three-point range. Had a shot where we could have won at regulation, and didn't really take a good one, and game went overtime, and it just almost seemed like the crowd worked against us, to be honest with you, because Vic Hall and Hubbard and those guys were just used to playing in front of the crowd, you know, them against Altavista, and then all the state championship football experience. But yeah, it was a great experience for those kids. In a lot of ways, it was a win because you know, they always talked about that particular group. Just, oh, Coach Hanks, I wish we could pack this place. We have a big gym. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's a nice sized gym, and you know, that night, for one night, it was packed. So from that standpoint, you know, I was proud and happy for those kids. But I still look back and then watching the state tournament that year, know that you know, and Ari Lee had actually already been down and watched us play one time. So I mean, you know, we in Martinsville had watched us. I mean, you know, people knew we had a nice club.